Jung, 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 Jung. There, did I get my hook in the first 30 seconds? If you spend any time on YouTube looking at psychological topics, sooner than later, a video about psychologist Carl Jung is going to come up in the recommended videos. I've watched quite a few of them myself, and many of them are very good. Many of Carl Jung's ideas are very good. But here's the thing. I don't read Jung anymore, in part because I don't have to. I've read enough already. But also because I've kind of moved on. If you are interested in psychology, you can make your own decision in that regard, but I think you should have a basic breakdown of his ideas, but also some kind of understanding of the sort of person he really was. You're probably going to hear one of two things. Either that he was a transcendent, almost messianic genius, or that he was a Nazi. There's some truth to both. But first, I may be revealing the kind of person I am when I bring it back to me for a moment when I ask you to subscribe to my channel, like the video, leave a comment, or better yet, a question I may be able to answer for you. And check out some of the links in the description below, which include an opportunity for you to help me with some research I'm doing. My own journey with Carl Jung began a long time ago with the greatest rock and roll power trio of all time and their last album, Synchronicity. Lead man Sting was 12-year-old me's absolute idol. I wasn't entirely sure what my looming puberty would entail when the album was released in 1983, but I knew if I had any say in it, I was going to come out of the other side of it just like Sting. Let's just say that didn't work out as planned. Synchronicity was actually just remastered a few years ago. I like to think the music has aged pretty well, so maybe young people now are more or less aware of it. Definitely check it out. The relationship to Carl Jung, beyond the title, which we will get into in a moment, has pictures of each member of the band on the cover. In one of the pictures, Sting is reading one of the Bollingen series books, Synchronicity by Carl Jung. I almost immediately went to my local library, where I was very well known because I was a weird kid with no friends, and demanded to be taken to this book. I actually brought the damn album with me, I didn't even... Backpacks weren't a thing back then. I just had it under my arm and rode my bike. I seem to recall the librarian giving me a little bit of a look, but she took me to the shelf where the 20 books of the Bollingen series were lined up and showed me the book, which I read, or tried to. I was a pretty precocious reader at a young age, but Jung is famously difficult to read. Still, he wrote about neat stuff. UFOs, psychics, magic. Wicked cool, right? At this point, I've read lots and lots of Jung, even the really boring stuff like his early word association studies. If I was going to sum up his ideas quickly without getting into the jargon I know I can be prone to, it's that the human mind is vast and largely unknowable. Not just unknown, but unknowable. Still, it is a constant churning machine for making meaning, and that in our experience of life, various constellations of meaning assemble themselves in the thoughts we think, the dreams we have, the stories we pay attention to, and even in the physical world around us. Moreover, making meaning is not just a tendency we have, but a skill we can develop throughout our entire lives. The better we get at making meaning, not just finding meaning, but making it, the more powerful we become as human beings. I still believe in all of those things, and Carl Jung was the person who put me on that path, and I remain deeply grateful. Here's the thing. Carl Jung was also kind of a jerk. Technically, he was not a Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer, but for a minute he was kind of Nazi adjacent, which hasn't aged particularly well. I mean, how could he do that? I don't know. Ask Disney. Most of his political decisions, not to mention statements about women, homosexuals, and racial minorities, look pretty bad these days, even if you ain't woke. He also assembled a bit of a cadre around himself, which didn't quite rise to the level of the NXIVM sex cult, but it was getting there. I do not entirely understand why the women in his life, particularly his wife, who had all the money, put up with him to the extent they did. I'm pretty sure I've been dumped for farting in my sleep. In any case, this is not meant to be a channel for relationship advice. Moving on. The story that bothers me the most about him, and that I think is the most revealing about his character, is that a friend of his had created a bit of a scandal for sending money and resources to the people fighting the fascists in Spain. You know, the kind of thing we build monuments to people for nowadays. At least we used to. At the time, it was a very bad scandal. The poor guy was excommunicated from polite society. His wife left him. He went broke. The works. Then he gets a letter from Jung inviting him to Bollingen Tower, which was Jung's sanctum sanctorum, and a place Jung rarely invited people to. I can just imagine the guy thinking, good old CG, I haven't lost all my friends. When he got there, which, by the way, is kind of in the middle of nowhere, Jung spoke to him through the locked front gate and reportedly said to him, even an animal knows when it's time to go into the woods and die. Yikes! I think Jung fully and consciously intended to tell this poor man, you've embarrassed me. Please commit suicide so we can all move on. He was a psychologist, and that is not something I am inclined to overlook or forgive. Still, Carl Jung would not be the first terrible person to have great ideas. Again, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't read Jung. I am saying that if you do, take it with a grain of salt. There's a lot of what I think of as great leader syndrome around Jung. You must never criticize the great leader or his ideas. Well, that's baloney, because even some of the people who would describe themselves as Jungians, and side note, Jung hated Jungians, have abandoned some of the things that were core to his psychological system. Example, contrasexual ensoulment, which is the idea that men have female souls and women have male souls. Frankly, I think this is just sloppy thinking, and Jungian authors like James Hillman, also reportedly kind of a jerk, don't buy into that anymore, although Hillman's actually dead too. Though this gets into complicated and sometimes controversial issues about assigning gender to anything or anyone for that matter, the more commonly accepted idea now is that the soul is always feminine and the ego is always masculine. You can imagine in some ways that your soul envelops the world while your ego thrusts out into it. As to why we associate masculine and feminine with thrusting and enveloping, well, you're going to have to talk to your dad about that when you're ready. So, synchronicity, which is one of the key ideas of Jung's that people know about, even before the Police released their album and made one of the greatest songs of the 1980s. I will link it in the description just in case you're unfamiliar. It has to do with something you could call the acausal connecting principle. An example from Jung was that once, while meeting with a client who was talking about a dream they had just had that prominently featured a golden scarab with Egyptian themes, a common native scarab, that is a golden green color, you've probably seen them yourself, flew in the open window. Jung caught it and said, "Here's your scarab." If you're interested, there are lots and lots of books on synchronicity, many of which are quite good and far easier to read than Jung. To sum up the idea, and to go back to our earlier discussion about the human mind being a meaning-making machine, most people have the experience of thinking about something or something is going on, and something else happens that can in no way be rationally connected to the thing that is on your mind, but nonetheless seems extremely profound. A phrase floating around out there is that synchronicity is God's way of letting you know he's paying attention. I would urge you to be very cautious about thinking that way, people who get too into following the hidden meaning of synchronicities have been known to wreck their lives because, gee, I keep seeing Bugs Bunny everywhere, and I think it means I'm supposed to quit my job and leave my wife and kids. That's literally a case I've heard of. It can be particularly dangerous for folks whose grip on reality is just a little loose. Now, does it get into some aspect, law of attraction-y kind of type thingy of the universe talking back to you? That's among the things that are unknowable. But does your mind have a tendency to more easily notice things that you are already paying attention to? That is known, and the answer is yes. Nothing will define your life more than what you pay attention to. Which is why I am so grateful that you have paid attention to me today. Honestly, I'm kind of a glutton for it. And you can provide me with that narcissistic supply if you like, subscribe, and ask a question in the comments. And maybe check out some of my other videos if you like psychological theory. That's what we do here. Take care of yourself.